When is that one time you called the person you swore you'd never contact again? My daughter Autumn came home from school on a Thursday with her backpack on backwards and her shoelaces untied. She walked past me without saying hello, went straight to her room, and I heard the lock click. That wasn't like her. Autumn was 14 and normally complained about homework or asked what was for dinner before disappearing into her cave. I gave her 20 minutes before knocking. "Sweetie, everything okay?" The silence lasted so long I almost walked away. Then I heard her voice, small and broken in a way that made my chest tighten. "Mom, can you make mac and cheese? The kind from the box, not the fancy kind." I made it exactly how she liked it. Extra butter and a little milk to make it creamy. She came out when I called her, sat at the kitchen table, and picked at the bowl without eating. Her hands were shaking. The fork kept missing her mouth. After watching her push the same noodle around for 5 minutes, I put my hand over hers. "Talk to me. What happened today?" She looked up with tears already streaming down her face. "Mom, something happened at school. I think I'm supposed to tell you, but I don't know how." The story came out in pieces over the next hour while the mac and cheese went cold. Dr. Philip Gaines, the school psychologist everyone loved, had called Autumn into his office during third period. He said her teachers were concerned about her anxiety levels and wanted to do a wellness check. Autumn thought it was normal because she'd been stressed about her geometry grade and her friend group drama. Dr. Gaines closed the door, locked it, and told her that sometimes physical release helps with stress. He made her sit on his lap while he asked questions about her home life, his hands moving places they shouldn't. When she tried to stand up, he held her there and said this was part of the therapy process, that she needed to trust him. He told her if she mentioned this to anyone, they'd think she was lying because he was a respected professional with 20 years of experience. Everyone would believe him over a teenage girl with anxiety issues. He'd already documented her mental health concerns in her file, which meant anything she said would sound like teenage drama or attention-seeking. The session lasted 30 minutes. He gave her a hall pass that said she'd been discussing academic stress. I spent that night throwing up in the bathroom while Autumn slept, or pretended to sleep in her room. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept seeing her face when she described what happened. The shame and confusion and fear all mixed together. How could I have sent her to school every day thinking she was safe? How could I have trusted the system to protect her when monsters were hiding behind credentials and office doors? The next morning, I called the school and asked to speak with Principal Novak. She had me come in immediately, ushered me into her office with concerned efficiency, and listened while I repeated what Autumn had told me. Her face went through several expressions: sympathy, shock, discomfort, before settling on something that looked like carefully managed doubt. "Mrs. Castellano, I understand you're upset, but Dr. Gaines is one of our most valued staff members. He's helped hundreds of students over the years. Are you sure Autumn isn't misinterpreting what happened?" Sometimes teenagers dramatize situations when they're going through emotional periods. I felt my face get hot. My daughter is not dramatic. She's terrified. She told me details that no child should know. This man assaulted her in your school, in his office, during school hours. Principal Novak's expression shifted to something colder, more administrative. "I appreciate your concern, but we have protocols for these situations. I'll need to investigate this thoroughly before taking any action. Making accusations against a staff member is serious. Dr. Gaines has an impeccable reputation. Without concrete evidence, this becomes a he said, she said situation. And frankly, Autumn does have documented anxiety issues that could affect her perception of events." I stood up so fast my chair fell backwards. "You're not going to do anything. You're going to protect him because he's been here 20 years and my daughter is just a kid with anxiety." Principal Novak stood too, her professional mask firmly in place. "I'm protecting the integrity of this institution. I'll speak with Dr. Gaines, review the situation, and follow proper procedures. But I will not ruin a man's career based on unsubstantiated claims from a student with known mental health issues." I left her office shaking with rage and went straight to the police station. Officer Brennan took my statement with the kind of exhausted patience that suggested he'd heard similar stories before. He wrote everything down, asked detailed questions that made me sick to answer, and finally closed his notebook with a sigh. "Here's the reality, ma'am. Your daughter is a minor, there were no witnesses, and Dr. Gaines is a respected professional. These cases are incredibly difficult to prove. It's your word and your daughter's word against his reputation and credentials. But she told me what happened. She's not lying. I can see it in her eyes. She's traumatized." Officer Brennan's expression was sympathetic but unhelpful. "I believe you believe her. But the district attorney won't touch a case like this without physical evidence or multiple victims. Even then, conviction rates are low. These predators are smart. They choose victims carefully and create plausible deniability. My advice? Find a lawyer, document everything, and prepare for a long fight. The system isn't designed to believe children over adults, especially respected adults with clean records." I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. How was this possible? How could everyone just dismiss what happened to my daughter because the man who hurt her had a title and a reputation? The unfairness of it made me want to scream until my throat bled. That night, Autumn asked if the police were going to arrest him. I had to look at my baby girl and tell her the truth. They said they need more evidence. She didn't cry. She just nodded like she'd expected it. Of course they don't believe me. Why would they? He's Dr. Gaines and I'm just some messed up kid. I pulled her into a hug while my heart shattered. "You're not messed up. What happened is not your fault. We'll figure this out." But inside, I had no idea how. The lawyer I hired, Rebecca Cho, was blunt during our first meeting. She spread out the paperwork on her desk and looked at me with tired eyes. "Mrs. Castellano, I've handled cases like this before. Most don't go anywhere. You're fighting an uphill battle against institutional protection and lack of physical evidence. Even if we found other victims, which is possible given predators rarely stop at one, getting them to come forward is nearly impossible. They're scared of exactly what's happening to your daughter right now, being called liars by everyone in authority." I asked her what our chances were. She tapped her pen against the desk. In court? Maybe 30% if we're lucky. These cases hinge on credibility, and the system is designed to favor the accused. Dr. Gaines will have character witnesses, professional credentials, and a legal team funded by the school district's insurance. Your daughter will be painted as unstable, attention-seeking, or confused. The defense will use her anxiety diagnosis against her. They'll argue she's prone to misinterpreting normal interactions. I left her office with a retainer agreement I couldn't afford and a sinking feeling in my stomach. The next week was hell. Autumn refused to go back to school. She spent most days in her room with the curtains closed, only coming out when I physically made her eat something. She stopped sleeping through the night. I'd hear her crying at 3 a.m, and when I went to comfort her, she'd pretend she was fine. She wasn't fine. She was breaking, and I was watching it happen in real time. My sister called on Saturday asking why Autumn hadn't been answering her texts. When I told her what happened, there was a long pause. Natalie, are you sure about this? Dr. Gaines has been at that school forever. I remember when Cousin David went through his depression sophomore year, Dr. Gaines really helped him. Maybe Autumn misunderstood something? I hung up on her, my own sister doubting my daughter. That's when I realized how isolated we were becoming. Everyone in our community knew Dr. Gaines. He volunteered at the youth center, organized mental health awareness events, spoke at school board meetings about supporting struggling students. He'd built a reputation so solid that questioning it felt like attacking a beloved institution. I started documenting everything. Every time Autumn had a nightmare, I wrote it down with timestamps. Every meal she couldn't finish. Every panic attack when someone knocked on the door. Rebecca had told me to build a pattern of trauma, to show how dramatically Autumn's behavior had changed after the incident. But looking at my notes felt like cataloging my daughter's destruction in real time. The school board meeting was on a Wednesday. I stood up during public comment and told the entire board what Dr. Gaines had done to my daughter. I gave every detail, held nothing back, made eye contact with each board member as I spoke. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked skeptical. One board member, an older woman named Patricia Whitmore, actually interrupted me. Mrs. Castellano, these are serious allegations. Have you considered that your daughter might be seeking attention? Teenagers sometimes fabricate stories when they're struggling emotionally. Dr. Gaines has served this district with distinction for 2 decades. I will not sit here and let you slander a good man without proof. The room erupted. Some parents clapped. Others shouted at me to sit down. A man in the back yelled that I was trying to destroy a good man's career because my daughter was troubled. Another mother stood up and defended Dr. Gaines, saying he'd helped her son through suicidal ideation and saved his life. How dare I attack someone who did so much good for the community? I stood there shaking, feeling like I was the one on trial instead of the man who'd hurt my child. Security asked me to leave when I refused to sit down. I walked out of that meeting knowing we were completely alone. My best friend Monica stopped returning my calls after I told her what happened. She sent a text saying she needed space because this was too heavy, and she didn't want to get involved in drama. My mother suggested I was being overprotective, and maybe therapy for both of us would help. Even my boss at the dental office where I worked as a hygienist pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home, implying the stress was affecting my judgment. Dr. Gaines continued working at the school. I'd see him in the drop-off line on the rare days I convinced Autumn to attend, smiling and waving at parents like nothing had happened. He posted on social media about Mental Health Awareness Month and got hundreds of supportive comments. The cognitive dissonance was maddening. Rebecca called with bad news. The district attorney's office officially declined to pursue charges. Insufficient evidence and credibility concerns were cited in their letter. We could pursue a civil case, but that would require tens of thousands of dollars I didn't have and years of litigation that would destroy what was left of Autumn's childhood. She recommended we consider moving to a different school district and starting fresh somewhere Dr. Gaines's reputation didn't precede him. Start fresh. Like we could just forget this happened and move on. Like Autumn could just heal by changing zip codes. I went home that night and did something I swore I'd never do. I opened the shoebox in the back of my closet, the one I'd kept hidden for 8 years, and pulled out the burner phone at the bottom. The number was still there, saved under the contact name I'd used as a bitter joke. Devil. My ex-husband, Vincent Lawson. We'd divorced when Autumn was 6 because I couldn't live with what he'd become. Vincent started out as a mechanic, working honest jobs and coming home dirty but proud. Then his cousin got him involved with people who needed problems solved, the kind of problems police couldn't or wouldn't handle. He'd been good at it. Too good. By the time I left, he was the guy you called when someone needed to disappear or learn a lesson they'd never forget. Vincent had 3 rules he lived by. Never hurt kids, never hurt women who didn't deserve it, and never work for free unless it was personal. I'd watched him come home with bloody knuckles and 1,000-yard stares too many times. The final straw came when he got arrested for assault and the charges mysteriously disappeared after witnesses recanted. I knew what that meant. His connections ran deep enough to make legal problems vanish. That terrified me more than anything. I'd taken Autumn and run, changed our last name back to my maiden name, moved 3 states away. Vincent never fought me on it. He knew what he was becoming, and he didn't want that life touching his daughter. The last thing he said to me was, if you ever need someone taken care of, call me. I'll never ask for payment. I'll never ask questions. I'll just handle it. At the time, I'd been horrified. Now, sitting in my dark living room with that phone in my hands, those words felt like a lifeline. I stared at that phone for 2 hours before I finally turned it on. The battery was almost dead, but it powered up. I typed out a message before I could change my mind. It's me. I need help. The response came back in 30 seconds. Address? I sent him our location and then sat in the dark living room waiting. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. What was I doing? I was calling a man I'd left because he solved problems with violence. But the system had failed. Every legal avenue had closed. Every authority figure had dismissed us. Dr. Gaines was still working with vulnerable children every single day, and I was the only one who seemed to care. Vincent showed up at 2 in the morning, parking 3 blocks away, and walking to our house like he used to when we were dating, and he'd sneak out to see me. He looked older, harder, with new scars on his knuckles and a coldness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Gray streaks in his dark hair, lines around his mouth that suggested he'd stopped smiling years ago. But when he saw me standing in the doorway, something softened. "Natalie, you look good." I didn't. I looked like I'd been crying for a week because I had. We sat in the kitchen while I told him everything. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, just listened with that intensity he'd always had. His jaw got tighter with every detail. When I mentioned how the police dismissed us, his hand curled into a fist on the table. When I described the school board meeting, he closed his eyes like he was counting to 10. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and cracked his knuckles. "This psychologist, he's still working at the school?" I nodded. "They were protecting him. The principal, the police, the school board. Everyone believes him because he's respected. My daughter is falling apart, and no one cares." Vincent's expression didn't change, but I saw something dangerous flicker in his eyes. "He does this to other kids?" I told him I didn't know for sure, but predators rarely stopped at one victim. That's what Rebecca had said. That's what statistics showed. Vincent pulled out his phone and typed something. "Give me his full name and address. Work address too." I wrote everything down on a piece of paper, my hand shaking. "Vincent, I don't want you to kill him. I stopped because I didn't know how to finish that sentence. I wanted justice. I wanted him to hurt the way Autumn was hurting. I wanted him to face consequences." Vincent folded the paper and put it in his pocket. "I understand. Trust me." He stood up to leave, and I grabbed his arm. "Why are you doing this? You could have ignored my message. We haven't talked in 8 years. He looked at me with those dark eyes that used to make me feel safe before they started scaring me. "Because she's my daughter. Because some things are more important than staying away. Because men like him count on people like you playing by rules while they break every rule that matters. The system protects them because they're good at looking respectable. I'm good at making them regret that." He paused at the door. "Don't call me. Don't text. Don't try to reach out. When this is done, you'll know. And Natalie, you never saw me tonight. I never came here. This conversation never happened." He left through the back door, and I didn't see him again for 3 days. During those 3 days, I went through every emotion. Guilt for involving Vincent, fear of what he might do, relief that someone was finally taking action, doubt about whether I'd made a terrible mistake. I kept checking the news for reports of violence or murders, terrified I'd see Dr. Gaines's name, but there was nothing. Autumn asked where I'd been going at night, if I was okay. I lied and said I was just stressed about bills. She seemed to accept it, though she watched me with those 2 knowing eyes that suggested she understood I was hiding something. On Friday, something strange happened. Autumn's friend Desiree's mother called me. We'd never been close, just exchanged polite hellos at school events. Her voice was shaking. "Mrs. Castellano, I need to talk to you about something. Can we meet?" I met her at a coffee shop downtown. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under her eyes, coffee cup shaking in her hands. "Desiree told me something last night. About Dr. Gaines." My chest tightened. "What did she tell you?" Mrs. Okonkwo took a deep breath. 2 years ago, he called her into his office. She'd been having trouble in math class, and he said he wanted to discuss study strategies. She was 12. She couldn't finish the sentence. She started crying instead. He did the same thing to her, made her sit on his lap, touched her, told her she was special and this was their secret. She never told anyone because he said no one would believe her. She only told me now because she heard about what happened to Autumn and realized she wasn't alone. I felt sick and vindicated at the same time. Another victim. Proof that Autumn wasn't lying, wasn't confused, wasn't seeking attention, but also proof that this monster had been hurting children for years while everyone praised him. I asked if she'd go to the police. Mrs. Okonkwo shook her head. Desiree is barely holding it together. The thought of telling strangers, of being questioned, of possibly testifying. She can't do it. Not right now. Maybe not ever. I understand if you need her statement for your case, but I can't force my daughter to relive that trauma just to help convict someone who probably won't face real consequences anyway. I told her I understood. We exchanged numbers and promised to stay in touch. As I left the coffee shop, I wondered how many other mothers were having similar conversations with their daughters. How many other victims were out there suffering in silence because they knew no one would believe them? The call came on Saturday morning. Principal Novak's voice was tight with barely contained panic. "Mrs. Castellano, I need you to come to the school immediately. There's been an incident involving Dr. Gaines." I drove there with my heart pounding. 3 police cars were parked in the lot. An ambulance was pulling away, sirens off. Officer Brennan met me at the entrance, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Gaines was found in his office this morning by the custodian. He'd been assaulted. Someone broke in overnight, restrained him, and left him with significant injuries. He also left a detailed confession and substantial evidence." Officer Brennan pulled out a folder and opened it. Inside were printed documents, Dr. Gaines's handwritten notes describing every student he'd victimized over the past 15 years. 23 names, 23 children. Autumn was just the most recent. Desiree was there, dated from 2 years ago. There were also printed emails between Dr. Gaines and someone using an encrypted account, discussing which students were vulnerable targets and how to avoid detection. Photos, videos, a systematic record of abuse that he'd kept like trophies. My hands shook as I looked at the papers. Where did these come from? Dr. Gaines claimed someone broke into his home office last night around 11 p.m., disabled his security system, and forced him to open his personal safe at gunpoint. The intruder made him write out a full confession detailing every victim and every incident. Then the intruder beat him severely before calling 911 from Dr. Gaines's own phone and leaving all the evidence on his kitchen table for responding officers to find. Officer Brennan's expression was complicated. The intruder also installed cameras in Dr. Gaines's office and home 6 weeks ago. We found the equipment. The footage corroborates everything in these documents. We have video of him assaulting students in his office. We have audio of phone calls where he bragged to an online contact about his methods. The evidence is overwhelming. Mrs. Castellano, I need to ask you something directly. Do you know anything about what happened to Dr. Gaines? I looked him in the eye and lied perfectly. Number: I have no idea. I've been home with my daughter. He studied my face for a long moment before nodding. The investigation is ongoing. But I'll be honest, whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. They bypassed a sophisticated security system, knew where to look for hidden evidence, and extracted a confession using methods I'd rather not detail. This wasn't random, it was professional. And frankly, based on what we found, I can't say I'm upset about it. Dr. Gaines is going to prison for a very long time. The other victims, we're contacting all their families today. They deserve to know they weren't alone and that their abuser is finally facing consequences. I drove home in a daze. Vincent had done it. He'd somehow gotten everything we needed and more. Evidence that would stand up in court. A confession that couldn't be recanted. Justice that the system had refused to provide. When I got home, Vincent was sitting on my back porch like he owned the place. He was drinking coffee from Autumn's favorite mug, the one with the cartoon cat on it. His knuckles were bandaged. I sat down next to him without saying anything. After a few minutes, he spoke. He's alive. Hurt, but alive. Broken ribs, fractured jaw, dislocated shoulder, extensive bruising. He'll heal enough to stand trial. The evidence is irrefutable. 23 families will get justice, including ours. How did you get him to confess? Vincent's smile was cold. People talk when they're motivated properly. He had a safe in his home office with documents he thought no one would ever see. Insurance, he called it. Proof of his conquests. Sick bastard was proud of what he'd done. He kept notes like he was documenting a research project. Photos organized by date. Videos categorized by student name. I just helped him understand that sharing those documents was in his best interest. I asked the question I was afraid to hear answered. What did you do to him? Vincent took a long sip of coffee. I introduced him to fear. Real fear. The kind he'd been inflicting on children for 15 years. I made him understand what it feels like to be completely powerless while someone bigger and stronger does whatever they want to you. Then I made him write down everything he'd done, every name, every date, every detail. He cried like a baby the whole time, begged me not to hurt him anymore, promised he'd stop if I just let him go. I told him the same thing he told those kids. No one will believe you. You're just making this up for attention. That's when he really broke. Vincent's expression was empty. I didn't enjoy it. I did what needed to be done. That's all. Did you plant the cameras? Vincent nodded. 6 weeks ago, right after you first texted me. I'd been watching him since then, gathering evidence, waiting to see if the system would handle it properly. When you called for help, I already had everything I needed. I just needed motivation to use it. The cameras recorded him assaulting 3 more students during that time. 3 more kids who would have been traumatized if I'd waited longer. I made the right choice acting when I did. I should have felt horrified. Vincent had broken into someone's home, assaulted them, tortured them into confession. He'd crossed every legal and moral line. But all I felt was relief and something darker. Satisfaction. Dr. Gaines had spent 15 years destroying children while everyone protected him. Now he was the one who was broken. Now he was the one no one would believe if he claimed he was the victim. The symmetry felt appropriate. Vincent stood up to leave. I need to ask you something. Are you going to be okay with this? With knowing what I did? With knowing you're the one who called me? Because you can't take this back. You can't unhear what I just told you. You're going to carry this for the rest of your life. I thought about Autumn, about Desiree, about 21 other children whose names I didn't know but whose pain I could imagine. I thought about how the principal had dismissed us, how the police had shrugged, how the school board had applauded a predator, how every legitimate system had failed. Yes, I can live with this. Vincent studied my face for a moment, then nodded. Good. Because there's something else you should know. The encrypted contact Dr. Gaines was emailing? I tracked him down. His name is Leonard Voss. He's a middle school counselor in Ohio. He and Dr. Gaines were part of an online network of educators who shared techniques for accessing and abusing vulnerable students. There are 12 of them that I identified. I've already forwarded all their information to the FBI. They'll be getting visits soon. My blood went cold. 12 of them? Vincent's expression was grim. It's a network. They protect each other, share victims, trade advice on avoiding detection. Dr. Gaines wasn't an isolated predator. He was part of a system. That's why he was so confident no one would believe your daughter. Because he'd been getting away with it for 15 years, and he had colleagues doing the same thing in other districts who could vouch for his professionalism if anyone questioned him. The scope of it was overwhelming. 12 predators in positions of trust. How many children had they hurt collectively? How many families had been dismissed and gaslit? How many kids were suffering right now because everyone believed the respectable professional over the troubled teenager? Vincent handed me a USB drive. This has everything. All the evidence I gathered, all the network communications, all the identified predators. I sent it to the FBI, but I'm giving you a copy too. Just in case. Hide it somewhere safe. If anything happens to the federal investigation, you can release this to the media. Make sure they can't bury it. He walked toward the back gate, then paused. I'm leaving town tonight. You won't hear from me again unless you need me. But if you do need me, use that number. I'll always come. And Natalie, tell Autumn her dad loves her. Tell her I'm sorry I couldn't be there for her growing up, but I'm glad I could do this one thing to keep her safe. After he left, I sat on the porch for a long time holding that USB drive. The weight of it felt heavier than it should. This tiny piece of plastic contained evidence that would destroy 12 lives and save countless others. It contained proof of my ex-husband's crimes, torture and assault, and breaking and entering. It contained the truth about what I'd done, calling a violent man to solve my problem because legal channels had failed. Eventually, I went inside and destroyed the burner phone, smashed it with a hammer, threw the pieces in 3 different dumpsters across town. Then I hid the USB drive in a safety deposit box at a bank across state lines, somewhere no one would think to look. The news broke that afternoon. Dr. Philip Gaines arrested on 23 counts of child molestation and abuse. Additional federal charges pending related to production and distribution of child exploitation materials. The story exploded across local media within hours. By evening, it had gone national. Parents were calling the school demanding answers. The school board held an emergency meeting. Principal Novak resigned in disgrace for failing to investigate properly, though she claimed she'd been misled by Dr. Gaines' professional reputation. The superintendent gave a press conference promising a full investigation into how this could have happened. He used words like accountability and transparency while carefully avoiding any admission of institutional failure. My phone started ringing. Parents I barely knew wanting to know if Autumn was okay. Neighbors who'd stopped talking to me suddenly expressing support. My sister called crying, apologizing for doubting me. My mother left a voicemail saying she was proud of me for standing up for Autumn. Monica sent a text. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there for you. I should have believed you. Can we talk?" The apologies felt hollow. Where were these people when we needed them? When we were being called liars and attention seekers? When my daughter was falling apart because no one believed her? They were silent. They were actively defending Dr. Gaines. They were part of the system that protected him. Now that the truth was undeniable, now that the evidence was overwhelming, suddenly everyone wanted to be on the right side. Suddenly everyone claimed they'd always suspected something was wrong. The cognitive dissonance was maddening. Autumn came out of her room when she saw the news. She looked at me with those searching eyes that saw too much. "Mom, did you do something?" I pulled her into a hug. Someone made sure the truth came out. That's all that matters. She held me tight. "Thank you. I don't know how you did it, but thank you." Over the next few weeks, other victims and their families started coming forward. Once the first few spoke up, others found courage. The evidence Vincent had gathered was so overwhelming that Dr. Gaines' lawyer immediately pushed for a plea deal. The prosecution had videos, documents, a written confession, and testimony from multiple victims spanning 15 years. There was no defense. 30 years minimum security, no possibility of parole. Dr. Gaines took the deal. His sentencing hearing was packed with victims and their families. The judge allowed victim impact statements. I sat in that courtroom and listened to 23 families describe how Dr. Gaines had destroyed their children. Some of the victims were adults now, abuse from a decade ago still affecting their lives. Others were current students, trauma so fresh they could barely speak. Autumn chose not to make a statement. She'd written something but decided she didn't want to give him any more of her words. I respected that. The judge sentenced him to the maximum allowed under the plea agreement. Before Dr. Gaines was led away, he looked at me. Really looked at me. There was fear in his eyes, but also something else. A question. He knew someone had come for him that night. He knew it wasn't random. He knew but couldn't prove anything. I stared back without expression until he looked away. The FBI investigation into the online network started making news 3 weeks later. 11 of the 12 educators Vincent had identified were arrested in coordinated raids across 6 states. They'd all been trading techniques, sharing victims, providing alibis for each other. The network had been operating for over a decade. The 12th member disappeared before arrests could be made. Authorities suspected he'd been tipped off and fled the country. I wondered if Vincent had tracked him down separately, decided that one needed a different kind of justice. But I never asked. Some answers are better left unknown. The school district settled out of court with all 23 families. Millions in damages, new policies about mandatory reporting, independent oversight of counselors and psychologists, annual training on recognizing abuse. They implemented everything 3 months too late to matter. They installed all the safeguards after the damage was done. That's how institutions work. They react to catastrophes instead of preventing them. But at least future students might be safer. That was something. Autumn started seeing a trauma therapist, a woman named Dr. Nora Patel, who specialized in childhood sexual abuse. The first few sessions were brutal. Autumn would come home exhausted and hollow-eyed. But slowly, painfully, she began to heal. She started sleeping better, started eating full meals, started talking about maybe going back to school next year, somewhere new where no one knew what happened. We moved 6 months later. New town, new school district, new start. Autumn picked the house, a small ranch with a big backyard and windows that let in lots of light. She wanted light. She was done with darkness. Her new school had no idea about her history. She was just a transfer student with good grades and some social anxiety. Normal teenager stuff. She made friends slowly, carefully, choosing people who felt safe. She joined the art club and discovered she was good at painting. Therapy helped her express things she couldn't say out loud. The campuses were dark at first, all shadows and harsh lines. But gradually, color started appearing. The lawsuit money sat in a trust fund for Autumn's college education. I didn't want to spend it on anything else. It felt like blood money, compensation for trauma that no amount of cash could fix. But it would give her opportunities. It would help her build a future that wasn't defined by what Dr. Gaines had done to her. One night, months after everything, Autumn asked me if I believed in vigilante justice. We were watching a movie where the hero took revenge on bad guys the system couldn't touch. I thought carefully before answering. I believe some people fall through the cracks of the system, and I believe sometimes the only way to help them is to step outside the system. That doesn't make it right. But sometimes right and wrong aren't as clear as we want them to be. She nodded like she understood something I hadn't said out loud. Mom, if you ever needed to call someone to help me, I'm glad you did. I'm glad someone cared enough to make sure he couldn't hurt anyone else. I wanted to tell her everything. About Vincent, about the torture, about the 12 predators, about the USB drive hidden in a safety deposit box. But some truths are too heavy for children to carry, even children who've already carried too much. A year later, I got a text from an unknown number. Just 2 words. She okay? I responded immediately. She's thriving. The reply came back quick. Good. That's all that matters. The number disconnected after that, but I kept the message saved. Vincent was out there somewhere, probably solving other people's problems in the only way he knew how. Part of me hoped he'd find peace. Part of me hoped he'd never stop. The world had too many predators and not enough people willing to do what needed to be done. 3 years after everything happened, Autumn graduated high school with honors. She'd been accepted to 5 universities and chose one across the country. Psychology major. She wanted to understand trauma, wanted to help other survivors, wanted to turn her pain into purpose. The night before she left for college, we sat on the back porch drinking tea and watching the stars. She was quiet for a long time before speaking. Mom, I know you called Dad. I've always known. I started to deny it, but she shook her head. I'm not stupid. Dad disappeared from our lives when I was 6. And then suddenly the man who hurt me ends up tortured and exposed? That's not coincidence. You called him. You asked him to do something. And I'm grateful. I don't know how to live with being grateful someone got hurt, but I am. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Does that make me a bad person? I pulled her close. It makes you human. The world isn't black and white. The system failed you. Someone stepped in and made sure you got justice. You're allowed to be grateful for that while also knowing the method was wrong. Both things can be true. She wiped her eyes. Do you ever regret it? Calling him? I thought about that question. Thought about the guilt I carried. Thought about the nights I couldn't sleep, wondering if I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. Thought about the 23 families who got closure. Thought about the 12 predators who would never hurt another child. Thought about my daughter, thriving despite everything, heading off to college with dreams and plans and a future. Number. I don't regret it. I wish I'd never had to make that choice. I wish the system had worked. I wish the people in authority had believed you and protected you. I wish a lot of things had gone differently. But given the choice I actually had, calling Vincent was the right decision. Autumn nodded. I think so too. She left for college the next day. I stood in her empty room afterward, looking at the walls she'd painted a soft yellow. The darkness was gone. The light had won. Not because the system worked, not because justice prevailed through proper channels, but because sometimes, when everything else fails, someone has to step into the shadows to protect the light. The guilt of what I'd done, calling Vincent, enabling violence, crossing lines I swore I'd never cross, that guilt would probably never leave. But when I looked at my daughter, when I saw her starting to laugh again, starting to trust again, starting to live again, I knew I'd make the same choice every time. The system had failed her. Failed 23 children. Someone had to do something. I got one final message from Vincent 5 years after everything happened. It was Autumn's college graduation day. She'd just walked across the stage to accept her diploma. The text came through while we were taking photos. Tell her congratulations. Tell her I'm proud of her. Tell her she's proof that surviving is stronger than the people who tried to break you. I never told Autumn about that message. Some things a father's love doesn't need words to communicate. She knew he was out there somewhere. She knew he'd done something unforgivable to protect her. She knew that complicated truth the way trauma survivors learn to hold complicated truths. Nothing is simple. Everything has weight. Years later, I got a call from Rebecca Cho, the lawyer who'd told me we had a 30% chance in court. She was writing a book about institutional failures in child protection cases and wanted to include Autumn's story. I politely declined. Some stories are too personal to become case studies. But she told me something that stuck with me. After Dr. Gaines's arrest and the network exposure, she'd taken on 6 more cases of similar abuse. 4 of them resulted in convictions. 2 are still pending. But all of them got further than they would have before. Because now prosecutors take these cases seriously. Now school districts investigate properly. Now when a child comes forward, people at least pause before dismissing them. Your daughter's case, what happened to her, it changed how the system responds. Not perfectly. Not enough. But better than before. I thanked her and hung up. That was something. Not justice in the pure sense. Not redemption for the broken system, but incremental change that might spare other families from going through what we did. Sometimes that's all you can hope for. Autumn is a licensed therapist now, specializing in childhood trauma. She's helped dozens of survivors find their voices and reclaim their lives. She got married last year to a kind man who knows her story and loves her anyway. They're talking about having children, the cycle of protection continuing forward. I think about Vincent sometimes. Wonder where he is. Wonder if he's still solving problems in the dark. Wonder if he ever found peace with what he is. I hope he knows that what he did for Autumn, for us, it mattered. It saved more than one life. It exposed a network of predators. It forced a broken system to acknowledge its failures. That has to count for something. The USB drive is still in that safety deposit box. I check on it once a year, making sure it's still there. Insurance against the possibility that someone might try to bury the truth. But so far, it's been unnecessary. The convictions held. The investigations continued. The network was destroyed. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courts and laws and proper procedures. Sometimes it comes from desperate parents making impossible choices. Sometimes it comes from calling the one person you swore you'd never contact again. Sometimes it comes from stepping into darkness to protect the light. I don't know if what I did was right. I just know my daughter is alive, safe, and healing. 23 other families got answers they'd been denied. 12 predators will never hurt another child. The system learned, too slowly, that protecting institutions matters less than protecting children. Dr. Philip Gaines will spend the rest of his life in prison, where predators like him belong. And Vincent, wherever he is, knows that the daughter he couldn't protect as a child is thriving as an adult because of what he did that night. That has to be enough. Because in the end, all any parent can do is protect their child, however they can. Even if it means calling the devil himself. Even if it means crossing lines that can never be uncrossed. Even if it means living with the weight of that choice for the rest of your life. Some weights are worth carrying. Autumn's future is one of them. If you're still here, you're a true fan. Show some support with a like and subscribe to catch the next one.